Thanks for joining us once again on The Catholic View for Women, where we give you news and views from a truly Catholic perspective. I'm Teresa Tomeo, and before I introduce my lovely co-host, I do want to mention someone who works with us behind the scenes on every single program. That's our wonderful pastoral advisor, Father Frank Pavone, National Director of Priests for Life. Astrid Bennett Gutierrez is the Executive Director of the Vita Initiative, and of course, Janet Morana, a familiar face also to all of you out there who've been EWTN viewers. You see her on the Defending Life program. You also hear her on Catholic radio as well. She's with Priests for Life and Silent No More. Now, we're going to talk about in this episode the prominence of many Christian brothers and sisters who are converting to Catholicism.
Right.
Raised Protestant, but converting to Catholicism after being impacted or affected by Catholics in the pro-life movement. We've seen many people do that already. People with big names in the pro-life movement.
Sure. Mm-hmm. I mean, you know, I guess especially at Priests for Life, you know, we've met so many of the leaders, and I think let's start first of all with Norma McCorvey herself, and Father Pavone was very instrumental in bringing her into the Catholic Church. He actually confirmed her. I was at her confirmation. Now,
she's the Roe from
Roe v. Wade. Mm-hmm. She herself, you know, obviously practiced no religion for many years, was involved in the abortion industry a little bit, came out of that. First, she was baptized a Christian. That was her first step by Reverend Flip Benham. And then gradually her involvement with the pro-lifers drew her from just being evangelical all the way into the Catholic Church. And it was really a constant communication with Father Pavone, and I was at her confirmation. It was beautiful. I mean, to me, look at that, to go all the way from being the part of that Supreme Court decision to becoming Catholic. And, you know, she's Catholic, you know, on fire now Catholic.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and another prominent person is Dr. Bernard Nathanson.
Dr. Nathanson,
yes. He was an atheist, Jewish background. And
began NARAL, he was the original one of the original founders of NARAL, National Abortion Rights Action.
So he became pro-life first, and I actually was with Father Pavone at the Human Life International Conference back in Irvine, California in 1994. He was supposed to give a talk on RU 486. And in fact, what happened was he got up to the microphone. Father Pavone actually introduced him, and he said, "I'm not giving the prescribed talk for today because something's been on my heart." And he said, "I am on the verge of conversion." Like he had already converted to be pro-life, and people were astonished. And I can still see Alice von Hildebrand was in the audience, and she leapt up in the air with joy, and the whole crowd stood up, and they said, "Let's say an Our Father and Hail Mary for Dr. Nathanson now." And it was shortly after that that he was baptized by Cardinal O'Connor. And Joan Andrews Bell, who was well known in the pro-life movement for the rescue movement and all that, and her husband Chris Bell, they have a pregnancy maternity
they're
homes.
amazing, yeah.
Joan was his godmother, and Cardinal O'Connor baptized Dr. Nathanson. I mean, it was because of the pro-life movement that he was drawn to the Catholic Church. And
incredible, because he was the one who actually invented those numbers about the women who died supposedly from back alley abortions, and they created this whole, that's another area that we've been lied to about in terms of the abortion industry, created this whole myth about so many women dying, and he said the media took it hook, line, and sinker and ran with it, and some of those numbers are still being used unfortunately today.
Exactly.
And how many stories were there when he converted
and the
to
slogans
Catholicism?
too. He mentions in his autobiography that they were laughing when they were making up those slogans about my body, my choice, all these things, knowing that women would buy it, buy into the lies. And of course, after his conversion, he's confessing all these things that we now know and are trying to convey to women that they've been sold a bill of goods.
One of the famous quotes that Dr. Nathanson says is that they would not have gotten away with what they did had the church been united, purposeful, and strong. And he told Father Pavone, actually right before he passed away, actually Father was at his bedside right before he died, and he said to him, "Father, how's the crusade going?" He always wanted to know how was the fight. But it was the fight then, like when he became pro-life and to fight to end abortion and get rid of those lies he told, that drew him into the Catholic Church. The truth of the faith was just a magnet pulling him in.
There's also Lila Rose from Live Action, who converted not too long ago to Catholicism. She was raised in a very strong, loving Christian home, but she was exposed to the Catholic Church through the pro-life movement. Marjorie Dannenfelser from the Susan B. Anthony list as a convert. She came into the church not too long ago. So
and also
leaders.
With our ministry, we have Brian Kemper, who's been involved for decades, you know, in the pro-life movement. He has the youth ministry, Stand True, and he also has come into the Catholic
Right before
Church.
he became Catholic, we were speaking with Father Frank at a pro-life event.
Right.
And he was grilling me. We were having a late night, glass of wine and going over the conference and talking. And Brian was asking me all these questions about this intercession to the saints and Mary. And Father Frank, being as knowledgeable as he is in the faith, I'm trying to answer the questions as best I could. I did pretty well because I come up against this all the time on my radio show with apologetics and whatnot. And I'm like, this brilliant theologian here. I'm like, come on, Father, can you help me a little bit? And you're doing fine. You're doing fine.
Well, Brian says that you were the last person, both you and Father, that pushed him over the edge, that he said, I can't deny it any longer. It's the Catholic Church where I belong.
Yeah.
That's where my home is. Well, recently, I was at a conference and I got to sit down with another recent convert. Her name is Kristan Hawkins. And she, of course, is the head of Students for Life of America. And she was raised in a non-denominational church. And I asked her that very question, okay, how did this happen? What was that transformation? So let's see what Kristan had to say.
My journey into the church wasn't an easy one. It wasn't fast. It was a slow process, I was raised in a home that was non-denominational with all the usual things that a lot of people think that Catholics believe. But it really was me becoming involved in the pro-life movement that made me really look at Catholicism. And I remember the first pregnancy center that I worked at was run by a Catholic woman, and just seeing her put her faith into action and meeting all the volunteers and hearing their stories. And when we launched Students for Life of America, I was the only Protestant. All of my hires, all of my people who were willing to go out to the country to do this crazy thing that we didn't know if it was going to work, to start these Students for Life groups and train students, they were Catholics. And they were, mostly graduates of Franciscan, other universities like Franciscan, people who said, we want to serve God through this movement. And these were Catholics that were on fire. I think that was a huge point in my life of just seeing Catholics live out their faith. I think another thing that helped me lead me back to church was when I moved away from my family in West Virginia, where I was raised, and I moved to Washington, D.C. I had a really hard time finding a church. I was raised in a non-denominational church, and it's so hard if you're raised in a non-denominational church to find another church that believes every single thing you believe. And that starts leading to questions of, well, why can't I find a church? Why is this church doing things differently? And who came up with that idea and that doctrine, and where did that come from? And I think the third thing, the third and final thing that really kind of cemented my journey home would have been Gunnar's diagnosis with cystic fibrosis, my oldest son, and really the theology of suffering. And I think that's something that we don't talk a lot about in church. We don't really want to talk about the suffering and why suffering exists, but it's important to understand, and it's important to be able to talk to other people about that. It's something that even me now, coming into church, I'm struggling with. How do you explain it to a 7-year-old, the theology of suffering, and how do you talk about these really hard issues? And that's why I'm so glad to now be Catholic, be in the Catholic Church, because I think this is a way where I can talk to Gunnar about the saints, and that's one of the things my priest first told me. He said, just start telling him the stories of the saints. Well, I was so excited to come into the Catholic Church. It's been something I've been thinking about for a number of years, and to be able to finally do it. I think it was difficult for me. I didn't have any family members who went with me that night. It was just me and my sponsor. And I think for me that was difficult to kind of do that alone. But it was just something that I kind of had to just suck up and do. And I think that was one of the struggles for me coming into the church in general, where I didn't want to go to Mass by myself, and church had always been a family thing, and now here I am going by myself, and maybe bringing 1 or 2 of my kids. But that's something I just had to suck up and do, because I'm so excited to be Catholic, and there's so many things that I've been grateful for since coming to church. Our children were baptized this fall, and I was so grateful that my husband went with me, my mother went with me, so I did have family support there. I have great friends who were able to fly in across the country to be there, to be godfather and godmother, and so that I was truly excited for that. I think it's something that I don't really have the answer to, and I still struggle with. My husband didn't come into the church with me, so that's something that I'm still dealing with. And I think the best thing that I have so far that I've figured out has just been, living your life by example, and letting people come to you with those questions. And I just don't. I don't push it on my husband. He knows where I'm at, and I hope he sees a difference in me, and I hope he sees that I handle the rough things differently, and because I have my faith and I have my church. And I think that's really where, I want him to come into the Catholic faith, and I want him to come to the Catholic Church, but I want to do it on his terms, and I don't want him to feel like I'm pushing it on him. And so I would rather him see my life changed and say, I want that for myself.
That's exactly what happened to me and Dominic, as we explained in our book, Intimate Graces. Dominic and I are reverts. We were raised Catholic, fell away, and then came back, as all of us did. But he came back first with this. I mean, he was on fire, and he started to change, and that's what attracted me again to the Catholic Church. So I think she makes an important point about not pushing this on your spouse or a family member or a loved one, and just being an example, loving your faith, loving your spouse, loving your family, and letting the God take care of the rest.
Look at what she said, though. She was raised in a non-denominational church in this small town, and then she comes to work for Students for Life of America in D.C., and now she's looking for a non-denominational church. And she goes to one church and goes, well, wait, that's not what they taught me in my church.
Right.
We don't believe that. That's strange. Then she tries another church another Sunday. That's different from what I learned too. What's going on here? Then another church. So she's hopping around to other Protestant denominations and other non-denominational churches, and she's hearing different messages of teachings. We believe this, or we don't believe that. It's kind of like this game that's going on. And so it starts to stir things in her mind. Meanwhile, she's exposed to all these Catholics, the student groups on campus, like she was talking about, Steubenville, all these on fire Catholic kids.
Or the woman at the Pregnancy Resource
Center. And then she talks about, too, like the students that go out to the abortion mills. They're the Catholics playing the rosary. So all this is spinning around in her while she's getting all these problems, trying to find a church that believes what she was brought up with, and she can't find it. And yet, why are all these people in harmony here? There's a sense of harmony, I think, that she saw in the Catholic Church that drew her to ask more and inquire.
Some people do say, though, and some of the arguments for people not coming into the church, just to kind of explain, the other side of it, is that, well, if you go to one parish, one priest may be liberal, one priest may be Orthodox. But what I tell people is, we can't prevent, and we hope that the priests and the other people who are, teaching are going to carry on the truths of the faith. That's one person. You have to look at what the church teaches. You have to go back to the basics. The magisterium, the dogma, the doctrine does not change. Disciplines change over the centuries and over the years, but not the dogma or the
The question
doctrine.
has to be, then why the pro-life movement? Why is it that the people find the authentic Catholicism within the pro-life movement? It's because we're boldly proclaiming these perennial truths that are not going to change, like contraception. That's always going to be an intrinsic evil. And we're basically boldly proclaiming that abortion is harmful, no matter how people react to us. We're going to always speak on behalf of the unborn joyfully, with hope. And so they're finding something within the pro-life movement, authentic Catholicism. It's unadulterated. And so that's why they're being transformed and called.
Amen. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Catholic View, talking about other converts who actually came into the church because of the influence of the pro-life movement. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Catholic View for Women, where my co-host and I are talking about how the pro-life movement has brought many people into the Catholic Church. And during the break, we were just discussing this long list of people. We already mentioned Lila Rose and Kristan Hawkins were featuring on this particular program from Students for Life. But you also, your own Jerry Horn.
Right, Jerry Horn actually was an evangelical minister for many years, involved in the pro-life movement for decades. And he too came, and his wife converted and came into the Catholic Church.
What was it? Do you remember that projected Jerry into the church?
I think it was, again, the truth and being surrounded by so many Catholics, and then the truth of our teachings with, abortifacient, contraception, and everything else. It was just like, it was a home where you felt, this is where I belong. I know when he was first making the journey, he worked not for Priest for Life, but for Judy Brown with American Life League. So he had that influence. So he went from being the evangelical pastor, very active in the pro-life movement. Actually, he and his wife had a home. They bought a house right next to the abortion clinic out in Wisconsin, because they were trying to rescue the girls from the abortionists and really help. And so, and this goes all the way back into the 80s. I mean, Jerry's been involved for a very long time. And then as years went on, he went to work for American Life League. He actually worked for also Joe Scheidler, Pro-Life Action League. Again, strong Catholic pro-life leaders. He was, Joe Scheidler has a beautiful chapel in his office, so Jerry was exposed to that. Yes. And Joe, actually, Joe got, it looks like a monastery, like where the benches are on either side, and he always gets visiting priests that come in and say Mass. So Jerry was exposed to Joe Scheidler, Judy Brown, and Father Pavone. So
well, there you go. You're just done.
And
it's a triple whammy.
Triple whammy.
And speaking of Joe Scheidler, something he said early on when I first entered the pro-life movement really stuck with me. He said, when we're in the pro-life movement, we're not only saving babies, but saving our own soul. And I thought that was so important, because I knew that as I was growing in the movement, learning more, I was around a lot of faithful Catholics who were on fire for their faith, teaching me the truth, excited about the church teaching, not apologizing for what the church
totally
teaches.
dedicated to
on
it.
fire,
Totally
wanting to
dedicated
share.
to it.
So that's inspiring. And when I first came into the movement, I had no idea that contraception was wrong. I had no idea. And then I'm there, I'm learning, and I'm on fire for my faith. And then now in the movement, I'm sharing these truths with other cultural Catholics who are becoming more knowledgeable about their faith and then growing in their faith. So even those of us who are culturally Catholic, maybe not too knowledgeable, you're in the movement, you're gonna grow.
But it's interesting, because the Catholics that are in the movement, and especially the Catholics on the front lines, even the ones that are volunteering and are running the pregnancy resource centers, they are committed Catholics. They know their faith. That's why they're in the pro-life movement to begin with.
Right.
Now they're drawing more volunteers in, and there may be people like you who are kind of where you were years ago, not now, of course, because of your position, but when you first started coming back, just learning your faith. But the people who are vested in the pro-life movement, I mean, they are on fire. So some of the best Catholics I've ever met, and other Christians, of course, too. But the Catholics are amazing.
Solid.
Yeah. And another example is he's now Father Paul Shank, but he was Paul Shank and his brother Rob Shank, and they were actually raised by Jewish parents. And here's another funny thing: their father worked for St. Anthony Messenger, so go figure. Up in upstate New York. But the two of them have this beautiful ministry, Faith in Action, in Washington D.C. And then again with Paul, he was just drawn to the Catholic Church, and he came to work with us for a period of time with the Priest for Life. And it was Father Pavone who actually brought him into the Catholic Church. And then after that, he left Priest for Life to continue on his journey, and he's now a Catholic priest. And he's actually part of the Respect Life office for the Diocese of Harrisburg. So he's really enmeshed as a Catholic priest now in the pro-life movement.
And then during the break, we were talking about Reggie Littlejohn.
Yes.
Yeah.
Reggie Littlejohn, of course, has that ministry about the forced abortion in China is her ministry. And again, she's become Catholic. Her husband was a Protestant minister. First, Reggie came into the Catholic Church. And then just recently, her husband now has made that step too. So the two of them are.
Oh, and you mentioned Pam Stenzel also.
Absolutely.
I was just
speaking with Jeff Cavins, and we were chatting about the fact that when he interviewed Pam Stenzel on his show, she was Baptist, but working with chastity. And he happened to chat with her, and he just realized that she was so knowledgeable about an issue that is so prominent in our faith, which is theology of the body, what the church says about sexuality. And chatting with him, and he just basically said, hey, you're probably more knowledgeable than most Catholics about this issue. Well, the Lord's work. 1 year later, I think she enters the Catholic Church. This is about 15 years ago. She's a very happy, enthusiastic Catholic, now with the fullness of the teaching on sexuality, because the Catholic faith is the fullness of the gospel. The teachings in the church, the dogmas do not change. Contraception, abortion, marriage, they will always be the same. So it's something that is very attractive.
Yeah, it
to a lot
draws
of
people.
Yeah.
Yes. And I would also say that even people that are not formally in the pro-life movement, like Scott Hahn, have been drawn in.
Well,
he
his
and
wife Kimberly was
because of
very
the
drawn because of the
issue
teachings, right?
of contraception. So these pro-life issues do draw people in, even though they're not in the pro-life movement. But it's the work of the pro-life movement that just shines a light on these teachings.
I heard when I was flipping through the stations in preparation and packing and coming, getting ready to come here for our taping, I had on one of the local Christian stations in my hometown of Detroit, and there was a pastor on being interviewed by the talk show host. And it's a nice station. They play Christian music and they have nice discussions on the gospel and whatnot. So occasionally I flip just to see what they're doing. And it was a nice discussion. And this young pastor was asked by the host, well, how old is your church? And he says, well, I'm so excited. We're celebrating 4 years in our church. And I thought, well, God bless you. That's great. Keep up the great work. And then I thought immediately, my church is over 2,000 years old.
Wow.
Founded by the Lord himself.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty incredible.
Well, when I had the chance to do that interview with Kristan, also she has 4 children, and 2 of them have cystic fibrosis. And so I asked her, how has that been? And what were there any pressures? As we know, those of us in the pro-life movement, people who have certain illnesses in their family, there's a big push to diagnose that early and do a termination of pregnancy. And then how is she managing being a working mom and having two of her 4 children that have those special needs? So let's take a look what Kristan had to say.
Being a full-time mom, someone who's working 60, 70 hours a week, 4 children, trying to be a good wife, it's hard. I think a lot of times we talk about, and I know I was, honored to be raised in this generation where it's, women can have it all. You can have your career and you can have your family. Yes, you can have it all, and we can say that, but I think we need to be really real with people to say, it's going to be extremely difficult. And in order to do that, you're going to make a lot of sacrifices. And there's always going to be something that suffers. If I'm spending too much time traveling for Students for Life, speaking, meeting with our ministry partners, and not enough time with my family, that suffers, and vice versa. And so it's always this really delicate balance. Gunnar and Gracie, my 2 that have cystic fibrosis, their care takes an immense amount of time. So it's something you just have to be patient with, and you have to build that into your schedule. And I think it's always, when I look back and, why has this happened to my family, and what is cystic fibrosis teaching me as a person? And I think that's one of the things that it's, this hidden blessing, that it's told me I need to slow down, and I need to focus on my family, and I need to be grateful for every single day that we have. And I can get so bam, 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 I gotta do this, I have to do this, that I can forget and enjoy those special moments that we have.
Wow.
I mean, Kristan is very fortunate too, because she has a lot of family support, and of course her husband, basically, Kristan's working full time in her job in the pro-life movement, and her husband basically is home with the 4 children. And she travels sometimes, like recently she was traveling with Gracie when I did that interview.
Yeah, I saw her in Michigan not too long ago. Yeah.
Right. And it's rough, because I saw her at one of the meals, and Gracie's there in the stroller, and she had to, crush her medicines and give her all her extra medicine. So, but she does manage it, and she said sometimes she just has to put the brakes on and say, okay, slow down, breathe. We're going to get through
Don't you think
this.
what she talked about earlier, the theology of suffering in the church, is
That's
probably
right.
helping her with this?
Absolutely.
And her conversion.
Absolutely. And that's what she told me. She said it's her coming into the Catholic Church has helped her deal with, why me, God? Also that question of, like, because her first child, Gunnar, was born with cystic fibrosis, then her other 2, Bear and Maverick, thanks be to God, didn't have it, and then Gracie did. So now, she's had that whole thing, and the pressure of doctors who told her, oh, we should test for it, and maybe you want to have a termination. She was like, absolutely not. She only deals with doctors who get it right. So it's a good example, and how a working mom does deal with children with special needs.
Beautiful testimony, beautiful story.
Well, I want to remind, of course, our viewers, this is our beautiful kitchen Madonna here, and she's our patroness for the programs, available at the Religious Catalog. And she has a kettle here because it's excuse me, to remind us of nourishing our body, both our soul and our body. She has the broom to keep the house clean, but also to keep our thoughts and actions clean. And the keys, which will keep the home safe, but also Mary will help us to unlock the keys to the kingdom to her son, Jesus Christ.
Beautiful.
Beautiful bronze statue, and I know we all have her in our homes.
Yes.
And I think it's about homework time, isn't it, Teresa?
It is.
Okay, homework. Well, first, at the EWTN website, EWTN.com, of course, there are a host of things. First of all, the programming. We have
Coming Home
the
program
Coming Home
with
Network.
Marcus Grodi is
With
excellent.
Marcus Grodi.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Catholic Answers. Catholic.com has a lot of information up there. And then CatholicsComeHome.org is another website that Tom Peterson runs. And
You said all those great commercials that have been running all over the
Yes.
country that have
Exactly.
had a huge impact.
It's kind of the doors open, inviting people, come to the
Beautiful
Catholic Church,
commercials.
come home to Rome, right? And of course, Scott and Kimberly Hahn's book, which is available at the EWTN Religious Catalog, which is called Rome, Sweet Home. All great resources. So if you know someone who's thinking of converting or just slightly interested, these are great resources to point out to them, really, to kind of help them along on that journey. And of course, go to the CatholicViewForWomen.com, our website, where we'll have all these resources listed. And of course, an opportunity to sign up for our e-letter, our monthly newsletter. And finally, of course, go to Facebook and like our fan page, The Catholic View for Women.
Great stuff, and wow, what a great list of people who have come home to the Catholic Church. Very
right.
powerful. Thanks, Janet and Astrid, and we'll see you next time on The View. And again, as Janet said, don't forget to visit our website, thecatholicview.com. Thanks for watching.